Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Jeff Chilton. Jeff studied ethnomycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s, and in 1973 began a 10-year career as a large-scale commercial mushroom grower. Jeff is the co-author of The Mushroom Cultivator, published in 1983. In 1989, Jeff established Namex, the first company to supply medicinal mushroom extracts to the nutritional supplement industry. In 1997, he organized the first organic certification workshop for mushroom production in China. Jeff became a founding member of the World Society for Mushroom Biology and Mushroom Products in 1994 and is a member of the International Society for Mushroom Science. Namex extracts are used by many supplement and food companies and are noted for their high quality based on scientific analysis of the active compounds. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Dr. Gray, thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell us your story. How did you become a mushroom grower?
Well, I was raised in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle.
Yeah.
What is Seattle known for? Rain.
Yep.
Perfect climate for growing mushrooms. And so they were around me as I was growing up. And then when I went to university, I studied anthropology because I really love the whole idea of other cultures and how they organize and what they do. But they have a mycology department at that university as well. So I studied mycology. And in my anthropological studies, I basically looked at the use of mushrooms historically worldwide for food, for medicine, and in shamanic rituals. So that was my field of study. And so I just put the two together, and that's ethnomycology. Now getting out of university, of course, there's no jobs for anthropologists. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to learn how to grow mushrooms? I thought, wow, that would be so cool. We had one mushroom farm in Washington State. I went there, I applied for a job. I was there for the next 10 years. And let me tell you, I was literally living with mushrooms.
So they became part of you and you part of them. That's your,
oh yeah, and what's interesting about mushroom cultivation, and again, this was a very big farm, 2 million pounds of agaricus mushrooms per year. We had a Japanese scientist that was also growing shiitake, oyster mushroom, and enoki mushroom. So I learned about growing those as well. But mushrooms do not sleep. And when you have a farm that size, you have, like, for example, there's 8 new crops being put in every week, 8 old crops being dumped on a production cycle. All mushrooms are harvested by hand. Every mushroom you've ever eaten has been picked by somebody by hand. So essentially, they're harvesters working at the farm every single
24/7
day. Christmas, New Year's, it doesn't stop. Again, like I say, mushrooms don't sleep. And especially not when you have all of those crops. And essentially, if you were to leave it for a day and not harvest, then a lot of those mushrooms, because they continue to grow, would become seconds. Because again, we harvest them, the agaricus mushroom, as a button, which is an immature mushroom that gives it a really good shelf life. But if you let them grow, they will open up. And now in the market, that's a number 2 instead of a number 1. So there's a great loss there if you can't harvest, like if the power goes out or something.
Oh, yeah.
But believe it or not, because these are climate controlled rooms, we would go into these rooms with miner's lights, helmets, a miner's light, and that's how people worked in these rooms. Now these days in mushroom growing houses, they actually will put lights in there, but the agaricus mushroom does not need light to grow. Most mushrooms do need light to grow. People think, oh no, the joke of, oh yeah, I must be a mushroom because they're keeping me in the dark and they're feeding me a bowl, whatever. So no, most mushrooms need light to grow. The agaricus does not. In fact, that's why traditionally back in Europe, it was grown in like the caves around Paris.
Fun facts. You just keep laying them on us. I want to talk about different species of mushrooms because I don't know much about the agaricus, and I want to talk about growing practices as well. But let's take it back a notch and just define kind of what is a mushroom. What is a mushroom and what are the plant parts of that? We'll start with the mushrooms
Yeah,
101. Yeah.
yeah, and that's very important because look, it's kind of interesting. Mushrooms don't have seeds. How do we grow mushrooms? They don't have seeds. What are
Yeah.
we supposed to do? Well, mushrooms produce spores. Those spores in nature, they go out on the wind currents. They land on the earth. They land on wood. They will germinate into a very fine filament. That filament's called a hypha. And when multiple of those hypha come together and fuse, it forms a network. And that network we call mycelium.
Hmm.
Mycelium is the vegetative body, and that's something that you would never see because it's underground, it's buried in the wood. So normally we will not see it. In fact, I like to say sometimes, okay, somebody's walking along a path that they walk every day to wherever, and one day they go, oh my God, look at that mushroom there. Where'd it come from? It's kind of like magic, right?
Hmm.
And yet that mushroom underground is that vegetative body, the mycelium, and that mushroom has actually been there for probably 2 weeks, but it didn't reach a size big enough for you to notice until it got to that one particular size. So this mycelium now, it's consuming all of the organic matter that's on the ground every year, annual plants, wood, leaves, you name it. It's part of that process of decomposing all of that back into humus. When conditions are right, like in the Northwest, the fall, and the rains come, temperature goes down, that's a trigger for the mushroom to grow. A mushroom needs high humidity. That's where
Sure.
the rains and getting the ground nice and moist. Now, the mushroom comes up, it goes through about a 2 week cycle. Up it comes, the cap expands. Underneath the cap are gills. Those gills produce the spores. And now we have a completion of the life cycle. So, what we would say here is we would say there are three what we would call plant parts, which is what they use in the supplement industry. And that's spore, mycelium, and mushroom. Now, traditionally, it's always been the mushroom that has been used for its functional purposes in traditional
Sure.
Chinese medicine and so on. Nobody's going to be out there digging up mycelium and trying to, pull it out and do that. So those are the plant parts, and so growing mushrooms, which is what we do, is not easy. It's expensive. As a mushroom grower, I learned that, a large scale mushroom grower, I learned that. So you cannot produce mushrooms in the United States and sell them as supplements.
Hmm.
And the reason is that a fresh mushroom you can take to market, and you can get, let's say, $5 a pound for your fresh mushrooms. Mushrooms, like most vegetables, are 90% water. Supplements are dried powders. You dry out that pound of mushrooms that you're getting $5 for. Now the value is up to $50 for that dried pound of mushrooms. It doesn't work for supplement use. And so all of the actual mushrooms that are genuine, that are in supplements, will have to come from somewhere else because it's just too expensive in the United States to do that. And that's why in 1989, I made my first trip to China, which of course is where all of the information is about the use of mushrooms for
Sure.
thousands of years as supplements and actually as food. So I went to China and I established contacts with growers, with processors, with research institutes. I went to conferences, and that was when, in 1997, being a company that believes in certified organic foods
Hmm.
and being certified since 1992, I went to China, and I said, look, I'm going to be growing mushrooms here, purchasing the mushrooms here. you're going to have to be certified organic. So I brought one of the largest organic certifiers in the US to China with me. We organized the very first workshop for certified organic mushrooms in China, 1997. By 2000, all of our mushrooms coming out of China and our extracts were certified organic. And look, people go, oh yeah, who's certifying them? High quality German certifiers are certifying them. And Dr. Gray, one of the most important things for me with the products we sell is analyzing them. That's one of the things that our company does. We spend so much money on analysis, and analysis starts with pesticides, which we have to have no pesticides for organic certification, heavy metals, the complete microbiological panel. All of that happens before anything leaves China. And then once it comes over to the United States, where we have our warehouse, we sample it and test again in totally different laboratories than the ones that they've been using in China. So we test every product 2 times to meet the standards. And, a lot of people think supplements, there's no regulation on supplements. Well, there's a lot of regulation on supplements. That doesn't mean the supplement you buy is going to be good. It could be a terrible product. It could have no benefits whatsoever, but it could still have low heavy metals, no pesticides, all the rest. So that's something, again, we feel very strongly about, is analysis. And the other side of it is we analyze for all of the medicinal compounds in mushrooms, which is, for me, the most important things, because up until 2015, we had literally no standards for mushroom products. No company was out there giving any kind of analytical results. We did. I had a white paper that I produced, a study in 2015, where we bought 40 products off the internet. And we tested our extracts. We also tested just dried mushrooms. And what that study showed was that the majority of the products that are being sold are not even mushroom.
What are they?
Well, here's what's interesting. I was telling you that you can't grow mushrooms in the United States and sell them into the supplement market. What companies have done is they will grow out the mycelium on sterilized grain at the end of the process, which is maybe 50 days. They will dry it, grind it to a powder, grain and all, and call it a mushroom. And so when we analyzed those products, they ended up being mostly grain starch.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. And this gets into, again, the testing methods that we've got, and also to the most important compound in medicinal, or what we also would call functional mushrooms, and that is the beta-glucan.
Yes, let's go there. You prompted about 12 other questions I want to ask you.
I know. I jumped over a lot of questions there.
I'm going to take us back one more time, though, because, and maybe you did answer kind of part of this. I was going to ask if the mycelium actually had medicinal value, or is it primarily the fruiting body, like the mushroom itself, that carries most of the benefit?
Well, look, see, here's what's interesting is that beta-glucans are in the cell walls of mycelium and of mushroom. The difference is, once that mushroom starts to form and matures, it's like a biofactory, and it is producing compounds that the mycelium is not. The mycelium is actually a very simple structure. Its job is to secrete enzymes, breaking down the organic matter, building up the food where it can continue to grow, and also support the mushroom. And the mycelium has never been utilized as a supplement because you have to dig it up. Now, listen, in China, they actually produce a lot of mycelium and put it into the supplement market. But they do that in what's called liquid fermentation, where they grow it in a liquid, and then at the end of the process, they remove the liquid and they have pure mycelium. That is a process that takes a lot of infrastructure. To actually grow mycelium on sterilized grain is simple, it's easy, does not take a lot of investment. And so that's what they do in the United States rather than growing pure mycelium. So what you get is you get a small amount of mycelium and mostly grain starch. And that was what was interesting about the beta glucan tests, because the beta glucan test that we used will test for beta glucan and what's called alpha glucan. Alpha glucan are the starches. Mushrooms do not contain starch. And what's interesting, you've probably heard people talk about how, oh yeah, humans and mushrooms are somewhat similar in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, getting back to classifications, we have the kingdom of animals, kingdom of plants, and the kingdom of fungi sitting right in the middle. Fungi produce glycogen as a storage carbohydrate, like humans. Fungi also breathe in oxygen, give out carbon dioxide. Completely opposite of plants. Plants produce starch. So what we found when we did our analyses is that mushrooms contain between 25 and 60% beta glucan. And it's interesting because that's species differential. Some species higher, some lower, and they have less than 5% alpha glucan, which if we pick up any on the mushroom, it would be probably some glycogen.
Sure.
The complete opposite was happening with these mycelium on grain products. Instead, it was 5% beta glucan and 30 to 60% alpha, which essentially validates the fact that those products are mostly grain starch. And when I put this report out, it absolutely changed the industry. And look, the worst part about it was that the companies selling these products were mislabeling the product. The product, when you went to buy it, on the front label, it said reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom, a picture of a mushroom. You think you're buying a mushroom supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those companies, when you turned it over, it would say, oh, mycelium. And then in the fine print, it would say myceliated rice, myceliated oats. But these same companies would be selling the materials that they are producing to other companies and selling them to other companies as mushroom. And those companies did not even know. They thought they were getting mushroom. And so they put out these, and they don't say mycelium or list the grains. So you have a lot of companies out there that aren't even doing that, which would be at least a minimum. Now, are you familiar with the food called tempeh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how it's made?
Soy? I don't know.
well, yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot, I mean, most people know it's soy, but beyond that, it's actually cooked soybeans with fungal mycelium grown on it. So when you're eating tempeh, you're eating mycelium. Well, that's what these companies are producing, but drying it to a powder and then calling it mushroom when it's not mushroom at all. There's no mushrooms in it. It is myceliated grain.
I was going to ask, what can we look for on a label? But it sounds like there's just so much mislabeling anyways in the industry that
Well, you know what I would look for is if it says grown in the US,
it's not a mushroom.
it's not a mushroom. No, absolutely not. Because literally you cannot grow. And if you look at all the statistics that the government collects on mushroom growers, all of the mushrooms being grown go into the fresh market. And any mushrooms that go into the supplement markets are simply made by, let's just say, herbalists
Mhm.
Practicing herbalists will create their own line of tinctures and things
Mhm.
like that. Well, they can often buy from a local mushroom grower,
Sure,
but the number of that and the amount of mushrooms going into that is tiny
sure.
compared to the industry itself. So no, there are no mushrooms on any scale going into the supplement market that are these mushrooms that are grown in the
Grown
US.
here.
They're simply not happening.
I didn't know that. Congratulations on taking organic mushroom growing to China.
Well,
Big
well, yeah,
accomplishment there.
well, yeah. You know what? It's one of those things where, look, it's almost like climate change or global warming or anything like that too. It's not just a matter of, oh yeah, we've got to do it here and we don't care what's happening over there. It's kind of like right now there's a lot of blame going on against China. Oh yeah, they're burning all this coal. You know who's selling them the coal? The United States, Canada, Australia, selling them the coal and then going, oh, look at them. They're burning all that coal. Who sold it to them? It's like, hey, wait a minute
Hello. Yeah,
here. The hypocrisy is a little bit deep. So,
agreed.
so our mushrooms are grown deep in the mountains of China, far away from the industrial areas.
We got to
You
get.
know,
Yeah, I hate cutting
well,
you off because you have so many good
no,
points. But
that's okay.
I want to totally get to that, but I want to come back to beta glucans because
Yep.
I want to make sure we don't jump over that because that's one of the most important pieces. And I'll give
Yes.
you back the mic here as far as what are the nutritional benefits of mushrooms, like why beta glucans are important, and also if you could get into the difference between like the nutritional benefits in gourmet mushrooms, what I purchase from a farmer's market, what I may forage for in the woods, right? Or the nutritional benefit found in the medicinal, like in the supplements and medicinal mushrooms.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say mushrooms are very nutritious. And what is interesting about it is when I started at the mushroom farm in 1973, classical nutritionists stated mushrooms had no nutritional value. Why did they say that? Low in calories. Low in calories. Oh, yeah, it tastes good, but no nutritional value. Totally wrong. They just didn't have enough analysis at the time to really know for sure. Mushrooms have 20 to 40% protein. It's high quality protein, maybe one essential amino acid that's missing there. They're high in carbohydrate, which is primarily what they're made of, but these are very beneficial carbohydrates. Are you familiar with mannitol?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, mannitol is a very slow acting carbohydrate. It's one of those carbohydrates that is recommended for people that have diabetes and things like that because it's slow acting. It has
Hmm.
less than half the amount of sugar that sucrose has got. So it's actually not very digestible. So what it's doing is it's feeding the microbiome, and so is the beta glucan. The beta glucan is part of the cell wall, it's part of the fiber. So it's also feeding the microbiome. Mushrooms are very high in fiber, um, low in fat, which accounts for, in many ways, the fact that there's a low amount of calories. Low in fat, very good levels of potassium and phosphorus, and reasonable levels of B1, B2, and B3. So it's a very nutritious food. I like to call it the forgotten food
Hmm.
and the missing dietary link. Because when you go out to Asia and you go into the food markets of Asia, you've got 12 to 15 different mushroom species there to choose from. In 1973, we had pretty much one mushroom in our markets. We actually, because we were growing shiitake on the farm there, we introduced fresh shiitake into the local market in 1978. I was eating fresh shiitake in the 70s. Do you eat shiitake at
Mhm.
all?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
They're
love
delicious. Me too. Yeah.
shiitake. It's my favorite edible mushroom. I mean, it is really excellent. And that's the one mushroom I like to recommend to people. And going to the second part of your question, and that is that, look, when you're certain mushrooms with these beta glucans have a little bit different architecture of the beta glucan. That architecture means whether one is highly active or not so active. So essentially, scientists have done a lot of studies on many of these mushroom species and have determined that there are, let's just say, a dozen species that are highly medicinal and where the beta glucans are very active, and there are other species where they're not. And I've got a book that lists 270 different mushroom species that have medicinal benefits. However, based on, in some cases, just one study. Whereas these top mushrooms, whether it be shiitake or maitake or lion's mane or cordyceps, they have a body of scientific data that is very, very deep.
Sure.
And so that's where, look, we're lucky because in the marketplaces, you can get shiitake, you can get maitake, and they will give you nutritional benefits and these functional benefits.
Sure.
Same with lion's mane. Familiar with lion's mane at all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lion's mane is really interesting because lion's mane.
Yeah, talk about it. Let's differentiate. We kind of talked about shiitake a little bit, but let's go into lion's mane and turkey tail and cordyceps and reishi and all those. I'll have you break those down. Yeah.
Yeah, and lion's mane is interesting because it's got compounds in it that they've identified that will stimulate what's called nerve growth factor. We produce nerve growth factor. It organizes and at times stimulates the production of neurons. As we get older, we produce less of it. And there's a lot of, let's just say, information that would suggest that that's one of the reasons why all of a sudden our memory starts to go downhill a little bit. Lack of this nerve growth factor.
I heard that it can help with cognitive decline, even help regenerate myelin. So great for Alzheimer's, depression.
They've got, well, what's interesting about lion's mane is they've actually got some clinical trials where they've gotten two groups of people, and they've got a control group and a regular. In Japan, they had this 30 people in each group. They gave them a whole battery of tests. Then the one group got 3 grams, only 3 grams of dried lion's mane. They took it daily. The other group, with the placebo group, after 120 days, they tested them again. The people that were eating the lion's mane actually tested higher. After they stopped taking lion's mane, they tested them again a month later, and they dropped back down to baseline.
Interesting.
So now that's one study. They've also done a clinical trial giving people about the same amount and testing whatever they test for dementia. So there is some initial evidence on that. And look, one of the issues in the supplement or herbal arena is that clinical trials are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find too many of them, and you also have to be very careful because look, I can look at some of these trials and say, well, who sponsored it? Oh, it's sponsored by the tobacco companies. Oh, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? It's you have to be able to read scientific papers and be able to really know. For example, there's a lot of in vitro studies which can give you all sorts of results. Does that actually translate to humans? Then there's animal studies, and you go, okay, that's closer. But then sometimes you look at it and it's like, oh yeah, they're giving like 50 milligrams or 100 milligrams per kilogram or something like that to this animal. We'd have to eat 20 dried grams a day to match that same amount. So
Sure.
there's a lot of things that you have to look for in scientific studies. But lion's mane, I mean, I think it's really interesting. There's a lot of people out doing it right now that are actually sort of test cases, so to speak.
Yeah.
But one of the things, let me just say this right away before we go too much further here, and that is, people think that when you take something like, they're so used to taking an aspirin or an IBU and they get immediate results. They like to think that if they're taking something, tomorrow they'll be waking up and it'll be a eureka moment.
Right.
And it's kind of like, it would be kind of like you and I taking our, let's just say, vitamin D tablet today or something. Then tomorrow we go, man, that vitamin D, God, I feel so much better. That's not
easy. Yeah.
really how it works. And one of the things I truly believe in is I believe in prevention.
Yep.
That is the basis for health. It's prevention, and diet is the foundation of health. So we have to keep that in mind. And so when I look at these functional mushrooms, I look at them as another layer of protection. You
Sure.
have to eat your mushrooms regularly. You have to supplement with it regularly. Don't expect anything overnight. But over time, if you are doing the other things right, as you know, there's a lot of factors that go into health, like eating right, like exercising and all of that. I mean, you're a integrative practitioner, so you know what that means. You know that it's just not a matter of going to a physician and getting a prescription and, oh, it's all good now. That's not really how it works.
I tell patients all the time, there's no pill, potion, or powder that's going to replace lifestyle changes. So lifestyle changes are the foundation, but these sort of supplements are an adjunct, right? An additional kind of, like you said, layer of protection, prevention, whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like people that go into the grocery store and they purchase stuff out of the middle aisles and it's all processed foods. And you're just like, it's like, whoa. And our food system in the United States or Canada does not help with health. We think, oh, what a wonderful system we've got. Look at all the abundance, when in fact, the large majority of that is, in a way,
not food,
anti-health,
right.
And yes, not health, not food.
Yep.
So we got lion's mane now. All of these species that, the major species, will have the beta glucans and will give you that immunological potentiation.
Okay.
And that comes from the beta glucans. So the primary species that I would say that we could delineate that way would be reishi.
Okay.
And the interesting, have you ever seen a reishi mushroom?
I don't know. Probably not.
It's really interesting because it's got a cap that's shaped like a ram's horn. And it's very woody. It's what's called a polypore. And polypores are mushrooms that grow off the side of trees. They're also called bracket fungi. It just looks like a shelf, also called shelf fungi, because they just grow out. So a reishi, when you dry it out, it is hard as wood. It's also very bitter. And the bitterness comes from compounds called triterpenoids. And triterpenoids are very good for liver function. So anybody with liver issues, blood issues, reishi is the one. That's what differentiates reishi from all the others. If there's any one species, someone is saying, well, what one species could I take that would help me out? I would say automatically say reishi, because not only is it one of the highest in beta glucans, but it also has these other compounds called triterpenoids. Okay. Now, the other mushroom that's very similar, that's also a polypore, is called turkey tail. And it's a fun little mushroom that again, it's a bracket fungus. And sometimes you find it on a tree and there are hundreds of them. It's really an interesting mushroom. They've actually developed turkey tail into a couple of drugs in China and Japan. And these drugs, and when I say drug, now look, they're not drugs in the classical sense that it's a purified compound, but it is an extraction that does do certain purification steps. But for example, the one turkey tail product in Japan it's called PSK, and it's considered a protein bound polysaccharide or protein bound beta glucan. Now, what they use those for as adjuvants to normal therapies, whether it's
Sure.
radiation or chemotherapy or something like that. So their role is to essentially help you maintain your immunity at the same time that it is being torn to shreds by these drugs.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I've heard turkey tail used for. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Adjunct for cancer
that's
treatment. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we've got reishi, we've got turkey tail. Yeah, the other two mushrooms that I say are primarily utilized for immunological potentiation would be shiitake and maitake. Shiitake in the late 70s, they actually extracted a pure beta glucan and use it as a drug in Japan, and that is called lentinin. And it again is used in the same way as PSK. So it's kind of interesting that they're producing these drug products. And look, all research, for example, when researchers are looking at mushrooms, what are they really doing? They're all looking at drug discovery, right? So what they do is they take that raw material, they extract it, they fractionate it into 10 different parts, and then they test every part against whatever their testing assays are looking for. And if they see something that's highly active, they go, oh, okay, that fraction I want to pull out. Let's see where we can go with this.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that research is actually drug development, but it does tell us something ultimately about the activity of specific mushrooms. And so that's how we can utilize it in the supplement industry.
What about cordyceps? What are the main benefits?
Isn't that a funny, have you ever seen the wild crafted cordyceps?
I don't think so. No.
Cordyceps in China is called caterpillar fungus. And that's because the traditional wildcrafted cordyceps, which grows in the steppes of Tibet, a caterpillar hibernates over winter and it digs down into the ground a little ways and then it hibernates. But while it's sleeping, spores of cordyceps are there. They germinate, they consume the whole inside of the caterpillar. And then in the summer, up comes this little strange mushroom growing right off the caterpillar, which of course never wakes up. And that is the cordyceps that traditionally has been used in China. So it's the little mushroom growing off of it and the caterpillar itself. Now,
is that why it's called the zombie? Is that called the zombie fungus or something?
Well, that's no, that's not. But I know what you're talking about. But at any rate, that particular what we would call a Chinese herb that they've used for thousands of years, primarily for neurasthenia, which is weakness from a disease and illness, and you just can't quite climb out of it. You're fatigued, you're energyless. That's where they have used cordyceps. Now, cordyceps, this little caterpillar fungus, they sell it in China now for $15,000 for a dried kilogram. That's 2 pounds.
Wow.
Now, look, there are no caterpillar fungi in the United States in a supplement product. No. We do produce a different species which has been used interchangeably called Cordyceps militaris, and we can grow that now. So we can grow it, and it's something that again works in the same way as the wildcrafted cordyceps. And look, wildcrafting I don't really like because it's not standardized. It's like people wildcrafting, you can pick mushrooms from all over the place and they're never really the same, so to speak.
Sure.
So cultivation for me is the best way to go. And besides, wildcrafting, anything people think, oh, great, this is just easy money. I'll go out there and collect all this stuff. And before, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, it's like, where'd all those wild mushrooms go to? Yeah, well, they got picked out and they're gone now. And this happened with the truffle in Europe. It went from like 200,000 tons to down to, I think today it's wild truffles are down to maybe 20 tons or something like that, but just the amount was staggering. So cordyceps, again, what they use it now in the supplement space is for energy.
Is it more to support the adrenals? What kind of, when you're saying someone who's kind of worn down and needs revived, does cordyceps have adrenal rejuvenating?
Well, you know what? I haven't seen that specifically, but adrenals does come up in the literature for sure. So that certainly might be something that you could try, because I see, that's something that you work on regularly.
And just stress management. I have to ask, we talk a lot about reducing stress, and I know there are adaptogenic properties of mushrooms as well. So can you speak to which mushrooms or blend of mushrooms is beneficial for stress management and those adaptogenic benefits?
Well, you know what? Most of these functional mushrooms are considered adaptogens.
Okay.
And look, the whole definition that we're talking about here is homeostasis. It's balance. And I'm sure you are very knowledgeable about balance and the fact that, look, when we get ill, we've gone out of balance, and somehow that's what's happening. And we've got to bring ourselves back into that homeostasis. And that's what mushrooms are known for, and that's why they're considered to be adaptogens. And that to me is just a basic philosophy of health, and a lot of people don't get that, but that is we're just all of a sudden out of balance. And certainly if we are stressed out, oh my God, that really throws people off, doesn't it?
Yes. So I know you're not a doctor, and you've already spoken to health benefits, and I don't want to make you say something you're uncomfortable with, but I want to be the devil's advocate here for who is not a good fit for mushrooms. So in my industry, some providers say patients who have autoimmune diseases or who have yeast overgrowth or mold toxicity or whatnot need to be cautious with mushrooms. Do you have an opinion on that as to if you feel
sure.
Like, yeah.
No, absolutely. First, let me just start 1, 2, 3 here. First of all, molds. Look, the issue with molds are the spores. This whole kingdom of fungi is broken down into what we call imperfect fungi and perfect fungi. Imperfect fungi are molds. The difference between them and the perfect is the perfect will produce a fruiting body, will produce a mushroom. The molds do not. They are simply in the mycelial stage. So, and what happens in the mycelial stage, they can produce spores. With the perfect fungi, no, it's the actual mushroom that's producing the spores. So if you're living in a house that's damp and you've got walls and you've got it growing on the walls, well, what's happening is that mycelium's growing on your wall, and at a certain point, it starts to sporulate, and now you're breathing those spores. Mm-hmm. So that's the issue with molds. It has absolutely nothing to do with mushrooms, unless you happen to be in a mushroom cultivation house and they're growing a mushroom that they will harvest at maturity, like an oyster mushroom. It doesn't, the button mushroom is called a button because it's immature. It does not develop to where the gills are exposed and it's producing spores. So you can be in there harvesting, you'll never breathe in spores. But if you're in another mushroom house, let's say growing oyster mushrooms, you could be in there and they're maturing and you could be breathing in tons of spores. They actually have a disease out there called mushroom worker's lung, and it's from people being in those environments breathing spores. And that's also true in the wild in certain places where there are a lot of certain species growing, and at certain times of years the spore load will be very heavy, which is not too much different than at the time when there's a lot of pollen in the air, and some people are very sensitive to that. Sure. So that's the whole issue with,
that's the main caveat. But generally speaking, it sounds like you feel like patients who have mold toxicity, that's coming from the spores. So mushrooms are contraindicated in there.
Absolutely not. And now getting to like candida, man, this is something I've heard since the 90s. And it's been utilized a lot by naturopaths, and that's what they do. They'll check everybody for candida, the very first thing. Well, that gets back to kind of what I would call the doctrine of signatures, where kind of like produces like, and it's like, No, I know classical herbalists that use mushrooms to treat candida, and I've searched and searched. There is
Yeah.
absolutely no scientific research that has anything to do with saying or proving that mushrooms are either produce candida or will feed candida. It's just one of those ideas that's like, oh, you've got a yeast, which is a part of this fungal kingdom. If you feed it a mushroom, it's like, yeah, how does that work? It doesn't work. So no. And then in terms of like autoimmune
Yeah.
disease as well, the fact is that I do have some papers where they're actually utilizing certain mushrooms for autoimmune diseases. So that also does not seem to be true. But look, it's really up to the practitioner. And the practitioner needing to look at the research themselves, make up their decisions. I'm not giving medical advice to anybody. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I don't make claims for what we sell. I point people to research papers and things like that. I mean, I've read thousands of papers over the last 30 years, and so many of them are done by researchers, and they're so complex a lot of times, but they can give you sort of a general view of what's going on, and certain ones are more applicable to what we're doing, like where they're actually talking about methods of analysis for active compounds. And what we really are all about here is I want to guarantee to the people that purchase our products that what they're getting is genuine. Mm-hmm. What they're getting is not something that's years old without any active compounds, but we've got tests that actually demonstrate it's got the active compounds in there. And getting back to supplement market, we guarantee for beta glucans. If you're looking for a supplement, that's something that you should be looking for on the label. Don't pay attention to all of the marketing speak on these companies' websites that talk about, oh yeah, our tempeh has got all of these beta glucans and all these other compounds. It's like, well, show me the test results. They can't. And so that's, for me, we don't make claims to our customer. We just say, look, here's the data. Here is the analytical information on our products. It's got what should be there. And that's what's important to me. All of the rest of the tests are like,
yeah. I love that you test your products. And we have other episodes where we talk about testing of supplements, looking for things like heavy metals and whatnot. So I love that you're speaking to that. But what 4 beta glucans are we to look for on the label? Or is that what you're saying when we're purchasing a mushroom product?
Yes. For example, with our real mushrooms consumer line, on the label, we will say not less than 25% beta glucans or not less than 30% beta glucans. So we are confirming that, yes, our product does contain beta glucans, and we're guaranteeing that.
Okay.
So that's what you would look for. And look, let me just also say that, be careful. There is just so much disinformation out there and so much what I call bait and switch on products. There's even some products out there we've tested that make those kind of beta glucan claims that are not real. But I would say that, and the fact of, is it grown? Are the mushrooms grown in the United States? Well, you know what it is. And if you don't believe me, just call them up and ask them, are you growing your whatever on grain? Is there any grain in the product? Can you send me some pictures of your production facility where all these mushrooms are being grown? We've got a slideshow on our website that I'm taking people on a tour of all of our mushroom farms. It's a 30-minute slideshow to show them where we grow our mushrooms.
Yeah, let's get into that. But quickly though, I'm glad that you mentioned some, I guess, mycelium are grown on grains. Are mushrooms actually grown on like different woods and also on like soy holes? I've heard that sort of thing.
Well, first of all, like the button mushroom, it's grown on a compost. That compost is mostly straw, but our mushrooms, and what's really interesting is that most functional mushrooms are wood decomposers. All of our reishi mushrooms are grown on a wood log.
So if someone has an allergy to that wood, is that going to be concerning for them?
Well, no, because like it's kind of like saying, well, if somebody has an allergy to what's in the soil and you've got this lettuce growing out of that, does that pick up what's in the soil other than the nutrients? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In other words, we're not selling you the substrate, which is what it's growing on. That would be like selling you sawdust or something. And that's the other thing that we grow on is sawdust, but we don't sell you the sawdust. When you pick the mushroom, the sawdust stays behind. It doesn't go with the mushroom. So no, we grow mostly.
Tell us all about your growing practices in the mountains.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, wood logs for reishi. And they're sawdust logs, really cool sawdust logs for almost all the other mushrooms that we grow are grown on the sawdust log. Because look, sawdust logs right now, and people say, oh, you're cutting down the forests. Well, you know, unfortunately, if you go to China, if you go to Europe, they don't have wild forests. Every forest they have is a plantation. You know, so wood being harvested for anything like that is from a wood lot. It's from a plantation. It's not something where, oh my God, there goes the last wild forest. No, that was gone ages ago. You know, I remember traveling through Europe back in the late 60s and going, wow, look at those forests. And that's really weird. All the trees are growing in rows. What's going on? Well, that's what's going on. So wood log for reishi, sawdust log with rice bran. So bran as a nutrient in that sawdust log. These what we call substrates are first sterilized, then they're inoculated with the mycelium, which is the seed. So live mycelium is our seed. We put that in there, it grows through, it colonizes, and then when the temperatures are right, and the beauty of our mushrooms being grown in China is they're grown in shade houses. They're not grown in these big warehouses that are climate controlled with all sorts of equipment that's bringing in fresh air and humidity and controlling the temperature and all that. No, it's grown very naturally. So our reishi mushrooms, we're harvesting those the first week in September because they love high heat. So they're growing like crazy during the summer. We harvest them the first week in September. The other mushrooms prefer cooler temperatures. So they're still incubating during the summer and early fall, and they don't actually grow to maturity to where we're going to harvest them like shiitake or maitake until the first week in November when temperatures are cooler. And then lion's mane loves temperatures that are even cooler. So it's not harvested until the end of November, early December. It likes 55 to 60 degrees. Shiitake and maitake are 60 to 65. Reishi is 75. So all grown, very natural, deep into the mountains. I mean, some of these farms that we go to, it's literally the end of the road. It's so very far away. And again, people go, well, yeah, but what about all the drift and all that? That's how we basically are running all of these tests on every single batch. If it doesn't meet our specification, it doesn't pass the test, it does not leave China, period. So that's something, I mean, we hold ourselves to very high standards and we have all of the data. We give companies certificates of analysis on that. So, you know, yeah. Especially when a bigger company comes to Namex and wants to buy our raw materials, they have a whole qualification process that we have to go through. I've gotten questionnaires from some of these companies that are 200 questions long. I mean, it's unbelievable what we go through to be qualified, especially for the bigger companies. And look, we sell to small companies. We also sell to some of the biggest multinationals in the world. It's crazy. And right now, what's happening, Dr. Gray, is that mushrooms are sort of moving out of the supplement space and now into the food and beverage space. So there are all sorts of companies now that are putting our mushroom extracts into beverages. And you've probably gone to the the beverage areas of some of the like Whole Foods markets or something like that, and you see all of the really interesting new beverages and how the whole cola drinking is slowly decreasing. Hooray! But beverages and then all sorts of different food products. They're putting our extracts into. They're even putting our extracts into chocolate, which is fun. So at any rate, it's a real expanding sort of what you can use these mushrooms for and use our extracts for. It's really expanding, and it's just like the innovative foods that you've got out there these days. I mean, things are really changing. There's a lot of creativity that's going on.
Very exciting. I know you've enlightened our listeners with a lot of fun facts they probably never thought they would learn about mushrooms. So tell us about your two main websites. Tell us about Real Mushrooms and Namex.
Well, Namex, NAMMEX.com. That's the wholesale site. That's where we're selling to other companies, just bulk powders to other companies. But we have a great section there. We got a menu for educational. I've got slideshows there that show you how our mushrooms are grown. I've got slideshows that talk about the differences between genuine mushrooms and these myceliated grain products, plus just a ton of other information. So a lot of information there. And realmushrooms.com is where you can get our products that are in a retail package. We don't sell them into stores that would compete with our customers. So we just sell those online. And Real Mushrooms also has a lot of information as well. Very, very deep in educational information. And that's really what we're trying to do is educate more people to mushrooms, why you should eat them, why you should supplement them if you like. And look, first thing I would say to people is put mushrooms into your diet. It's a very important food. It's the missing link in your diet. Put mushrooms, try shiitake mushrooms. They're delicious. And then if you feel the need, then think about supplementation, but eat mushrooms first. That's really important.
I usually end each interview asking the guest their top longevity tip. So maybe you just answered that.
That would,
okay.
well, yes. And they've actually done these studies out in Asia where they've given people these questionnaires about diet, and they have found that people eating mushrooms and having mushrooms in their diet actually live longer.
There you go. There you go. We need to add mushrooms to our diet. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show today and sharing your wealth of knowledge on the benefits of that forgotten food. I like how you called mushrooms a forgotten food. So lots of fun facts from this episode. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Dr. Gray, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.